Welcome back to our Florida podcast. I'm your host, May. Every other week on Mondays, I will discuss one of Florida's diverse wildlife and ecosystems or share and chat about current events affecting our wildlife.
Hi, and I am your other co-host, Kaylee. I am Megan's sister, and on the opposite Mondays of her, I'll be bringing you a story from Florida history, whether it's something cool, unique, quirky, or crazy and majorly impactful. But I like sharing stories about the people that have lived here before us.
All right, so this week's episode is all about Florida's only bear, the Florida black bear, a subspecies of the American black bear. So we're going to start with an overview of black bears, just kind of general knowledge and learn about them. Then we're going to go ahead and talk about the 2015 48-hour black bear hunt and the future of black bears in 2025. So we got a lot of information to go ahead and discuss. Let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to try to keep this under as like just one part, but it may end up becoming a part 1 and a part 2. But we shall see. So the information I have today is solely focused on what FWC has on its website. I didn't use many other resources as the FWC is my main topic, and so I went ahead and used their sources for this week's episode just for reference. FWC biologists estimate that there are around 4,000 black bears in Florida. The Florida black bear has genetic and skeletal characteristics that make them different, but overall they look like your average black bear. Sometimes they have a tan muzzle or even a blonde or white blazes on their chest. So, black bears, just like humans, will walk flat-footed and can manage to sprint up to 35 miles per hour. So, they walk like us, but they run 10 times faster than us.
That's crazy. That's way too fast.
Right? Yeah. Which I assume, part of it's like the difference is that, they have 4 legs and we only have 2 that we use to run. But regardless, that's really, really fast. Black bears have 5 claws on each paw, and unlike cats, these claws cannot be retracted, making it a lot easier to spot their bear tracks because when they are walking, they dig into the ground, dirt, trees, whatever they are on, they're gonna latch into basically. Male black bears usually weigh 250 to 350 pounds, and they require a 60 square mile area to live in. Female black bears usually weigh between 130 and 180 pounds and require a 15 to 20 square mile area. So a lot less than black bears, but still a decent amount that they need for their own territory. Female bears reach sexual maturity bears in general reach sexual maturity between 3 and 4 years of age. So, females, however, for the breeding season for Florida black bears usually runs from June to early August. And then an interesting breeding adaptation that bears have is that they have delayed implantation. Basically, this means that the eggs are fertilized in the summer, but only will develop to the blastocyst stage and do not implant in the uterine wall until late November or early December. So basically, when they're in the den, they're hibernating. That's when the falling stage of that will happen. I thought that was super fascinating. I found it pretty cool.
Yeah, it's cool. Their body's like, okay, you don't need to grow a baby right now. You just need to feed yourself, and then we'll get to that when you're chilling.
Exactly. So basically what you said, but meaning the female bear, if she is in poor condition, the fetus will not develop or the female will miscarry. So a female in better condition could have a bigger litter, whereas a female bear in poor condition wouldn't have more offspring than what she could physically handle, based on physical resources, food, stress, environment, things like that. So pretty cool. I thought that was pretty cool. Female black bears will hibernate in den each winter because of bear cubs. They may choose a den like a tree cavity, an in-ground den, or a ground nest den. They may even hibernate in a super thick thicket of saw palmettos. So, I don't really know how they're getting into it without disrupting it, but they're getting into them and they'll den there. Hibernate, which I'll talk a little bit more about that later on, but yeah, I thought that was pretty cool too. It's actually, I'm not even gonna go there because I'm gonna talk about it later. Tee hee. Alright, so typically a female bear will have around 2 to 3 cubs, born anywhere from late January or early February. Each cub typically only weighs about 8 to 15 ounces, or the size of a soda can, or even a stick of butter. So tiny little babies. Little babies. Alright. So bear cubs will nurse with mom until April and then will not emerge for several months from the actual den. So in the fall, they are weaned and then they will hang out with mom in the den till actual next winter. They're born typically in the January, beginning of February, give or take, and then they're gonna go ahead and nurse with mom until April and stay that way until they emerge out of their dens in the fall. So basically, they're gonna spend a lot of the time just with mom wherever she is in the den. That's when they're gonna hang out. And even after they've been weaned in the fall, the following fall, they're still gonna go ahead and hang out with mom. Most of the time, they'll hang out with mom again for the following winter and they'll den again with her. So this means that female black bears are only breeding every other year.
Wow. Okay.
Not always, but a lot of times just because they spend kind of like that second year with mom still and they'll den with her.
I like this system instead of it being like, no, you're gonna have a baby all the time or multiple babies like other animals. They're like, nope, only if you're ready, only if you're fed, and also we gotta get the other babies out first, and then we can talk about having another one. I feel like their
Yeah.
reproductive system is on their side.
The
They're girls,
reproductive
girls.
system, they are girls, and their reproductive system is on their side. However, all right. So, 25 to 50% of bear cubs will die before they reach a year old. These deaths can be from drowning, den cave-ins, starvation, and infections, and some of the absolute biggest threats they face are threats from other bears, especially male bears, and being hit by vehicles. So, reproductive-wise, girls girl, 1000% I stand by it. Male bears, fucking everything up though. Because, yeah, fucking shit up. And basically, like we previously discussed on our Florida Panther episode, just like the male panthers have to go ahead and explore and get to their own territory, male cubs will have to move on from mom's territory to their own territory. And in that time, they have to be able to get from their territory, move to the other without having another male bear go after them, get through their own territory. It's just pretty hard. So I will give them that. They do have it pretty crappy, but they turn around and kind of do it to themselves later on anyway, so. About 46% of male bears can't make it to the next territory based on loss of habitat and vehicle collisions.
Yikes, it's almost half.
The Florida black bear diet consists of plants such as fruits, nuts, and berries, insects like termites, ants, yellow jackets, and around 5% of that are all possums, armadillos, and carrion, decaying flesh of dead animals.
Roadkill.
Roadkill, yeah. But I didn't know that roadkill actually had like an actual name for it and then I had to look it up because I was like, what animal is that? And then I was like, I'm an idiot. Educate yourself. So,
First merge. Educate yourself.
in the fall, bears will start to consume about 20,000 calories a day or forage for about 18 hours a day. Bears can gain up to 1.5 times their summer weight in fall, and this is called hyperphagia, which is essentially a feeding frenzy. So basically, before fall, in the summertime, they're consuming about 5,000 calories a day. They start preparing for fall, they hit fall, they're going into hyperphagia, a feeding frenzy, and they're consuming 20,000 calories a day, and typically it takes them about 18 hours to get that many calories. So they're doing a lot.
Their whole-time job is binge eating.
Yes, they dead ass. Yeah.
Their overtime job.
Their daytime, overtime, and night job. They're working girls. The Florida bear habitat consists of bayheads, flatwood, swamps, and scrub oak ridges. So just about anything that's going to have trees, somewhere for them to den. That's their requirements. We talked about it a little bit before, but do Florida black bears hibernate? And honestly, they sure freaking do. Now, this typically looks a little bit different for bears that reside up north and experience a true winter, but here in Florida, as many of you already know, we do not have a true winter, in my own personal opinion. But even black bears in Florida will prepare and participate in hibernation. During this time, bears do not drink, do not eat, urinate, or defecate, which I did not know either of those. I just assumed that maybe they dedicate a little spot in their den, but also I also did not realize that dens were so small. Like, they're really just like space for mom and you know, like who's actually fitting in there, and that's it. Because they're literally just gonna sleep, and that's it. They're not gonna do anything else besides that. I thought dens were way bigger, and they are not. In Florida, we have seen that male black bears will hold off on hibernating though, especially in South Florida because of the temperatures. Or if they do decide to hibernate, they will have a shorter hibernation period, which also makes sense for our lack of winter. And so this is a general overview of black bears. We've learned so far they do hibernate, what they eat, which is about 80% of just plants. Then they're going to go ahead and take care of some insects for us. I do appreciate that they eat yellow jackets. I find that pretty cool. Like also keep it up because fuck those guys. And you know, we've learned about female reproduction, things like that. And so it's pretty fascinating. They're pretty cool. So, a little bit of the history, or a part of the Florida black bear history that we're going to go ahead and talk about is the 2015 bear hunt. Now, so basically you learn some cool shit about black bears, but there was a 2015 bear hunt that was only able to last 48 hours, which for reference, and why I'm referencing the 48 hours so much is that the hunt originally was supposed to last, it was open for a month, and it had to be closed early.
Because so many bears were killed in the first 48 hours?
Yeah. They had to shut down early. And the
Was
amount
it
of
that
hunters,
easy to kill them, or just that, that many hunters that were into it?
yeah, I'm gonna get into it actually.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's a lot of different factors. I don't think that they were actually prepared. Our last bear hunt that we had actually done, I believe, was 1993. I believe I'll have to fact check that as well, but I believe it was 1993 was our last bear hunt that we had done before that, because in the 1970s their numbers were like in the hundreds prior. Like I think there was like 500 or so. And then FWC recently shared in a video presentation that in the 1500s there was about 11,000 bears. So from 1500 to 1970 or so, we went from having over 11,000 to having 500, and now we're up to about 4,000 today, give or take, that they have estimated. That's not really a count or exact number. It's pretty hard to go ahead and get black bear research and get numbers. They usually kind of base off like a 10-year time frame. So on October 24th in 2016, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation, FWC, opened 4 out of the 7 bear management units. The idea behind it was that we needed to stabilize the large, resilient, and growing bear population. This was FWC's main and essentially a consistent method to managing the Florida black bear population. Completing a limited bear hunting season and the 4 BMUs would control the population. So, just for some background, there are technically 7 bear management units. We have 7 BMUs, and again, bear management units, and those are the Big Bend, Central Florida, East Panhandle, North Florida, South Central Florida, and the West Panhandle. Going into the hunt, the 4 BMUs participating would be South, Central, North, and the East Panhandle. The plan was to eliminate 20% of the total bear population across all 4. So, FW states that they took a conservative approach to deciding the bear harvest percentage. On a side note, I think using the phrasing we decided to take a conservative approach when talking about doing a bear hunt that's eliminating 20% of the population is not the right choice of words for that.
Seems like
personally.
a lot, 1 in 5. It makes me wonder, like, so, like, we do, you have to have permits for deer hunting and other things. Like, what percentage of the population are you taking of those things? Because they procreate much more.
They do, but I don't actually know. I never looked it up. That's a good point though. I thought about the same thing. But yeah, so they're eliminating 20% of the total bear population. So essentially the plan was that they would take the number of bears harvested, and that number would stabilize bear numbers, population, and female bears reproducing. So it was decided that at least an annual 20% mortality in each BMU is needed to offset annual reproduction. They estimate the 20 from a study in 2002 for the East Panhandle in South Florida, and in 2014 North and Central Florida. So what that means is that they did not actually have accurate numbers for 2015. They were using numbers about population from 2002 for East Panhandle and South Florida, and then 2014 for North and Central. So North and Central Florida had probably relatively accurate numbers for that hunt, but the East Panhandle and South Florida definitely did not probably have the most accurate numbers because that was from 2002, which was over 10 years ago. So I also think that them saying that they took a conservative approach seems pretty bullshit, in my own
Did look
opinion.
up the deer. The deer are about 20, it seems like, just like a real
Okay.
quick Google search. But also, I mean, deer procreation habits are very different than bears.
Deer procreation habits are very different. Also, I'm pretty sure their maturity rates for offspring is a lot quicker than bears, like significantly quicker.
Yeah. Well, and it's also like deer can live among, it's not great, but they can live among, gated communities and houses and shit. Bears, not so much.
Bears cannot or should not.
Habitat loss, like obviously everything's losing habitat, but one's feeling it way more than the others.
Within this 20%, they subtracted the annual known mortality, basically the number of bear fatalities and automobile incidents, and bears removed due to conflict behavior. FWC used the average of the last 3 years of vehicle strikes and conflict behavior to estimate the non-hunting mortality for 2020. Bear permits were available from August 3rd to October 23rd. Permits costing for residents in Florida $100 and for non-residents $300. So, 3,776 permits were sold. 99% of those were retained by Florida residents. The remaining 52 permits were obtained by non-Florida residents. The estimated proceeds from this bear hunt was around $388,000, and the proceeds would go to fund human bear conflict prevention and waste management efforts in Florida with a focus on bear-resistant trash cans. So, two thoughts here. One, the number that I just read off, 388,000, that is from my own personal math. FWC will say that there was a little less than, I think, like 375,000. I'm waiting for public records to see exactly where they're getting that number, because if I do the math based on the permits that they were actually sold and, the numbers that they did provide, those are two different numbers.
Gotcha.
So, I find it very
Maybe
interesting. And my second thought is like, those are some super expensive trash cans. If we have supposedly spent all of that money just on bear conflict prevention. So,
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends on like the timeline that money's being spent. Is that like in a year or is that over the last 10 years? Because over 10 years, like I could see that. Also, I think that's like a $20,000 difference, is what you're saying, between like if you just do the math on what theirs is. So obviously there's some cost to running the program. So I don't know, maybe like the number that they're saying is like the profit after they subtract that cost. Yeah, definitely intriguing though, with it being a public good, essentially.
all right. So, hunters were asked which BMU they would be planning on hunting, and with 52% being in Central Florida, 28% in East Panhandle, 11% in North Florida, and 9% in South Florida. So basically, I'm going to kind of break down each of the bear management units that we're going to be harvested in, and kind of go over what the objective of what the harvest was, what they projected it to be, and then actually what the actual harvest was in that area. I'm just going to break it down by each area. So the East Panhandle, that's going to basically be North Florida, up in that little shelf is what I kind of call it. The population estimate from 2002 was 600 bears. 20% of the population would have been 120 bears, and the norm mortality was about a 3-year average of about 80. So their harvest objective was 40, and the actual harvest was 114. Yeah. Mind you, and also, I don't think I've said this so far, so let me put this also into perspective. They sold 3,776 permits. The plan was to only harvest 320 bears, though. So a massive oversell on permits, it seems. So that was the Panhandle. They anticipated 40. Actual harvest was 114. North Florida's estimated population as of 2014 was 550. 20% of the population would have been 110. and the harvest objective was 100, but the actual harvest was only 25, so significantly less.
Okay. Well, that was where the least amount of permits was sold, right? Or was it South Florida? Maybe that was
Um,
second to least.
so South was the least, North Florida followed by the second.
Okay.
Um, Central Florida estimated population was 1,300, and these numbers were from 2014. 20% of the population would have been 260. The harvest objective would have been 100, and the actual harvest was 143.
Okay.
And then for South Florida, the population estimate was about 700, and this is from numbers from 2002. 20% of the population would have been 140. The harvest objective was 80, and the actual harvest is 22. So also pretty low.
Okay.
Part of the reason why South Florida's numbers are so low is because Big Cypress?
Big Cypress.
Yeah, Big Cypress does not include themselves in the bear hunt.
Okay.
So that population does not have that there. There's also less area to be hunting in
Is
that
that because
area
like
just because
its
they're not
status as
participating.
a national preserve, like the national part of it overrides the state essentially?
So I don't actually know. Their 2015 Black Bear report does not actually say. However, when I was in that meeting recently, they did say that they just don't all they basically said that they just don't have approval, they don't have partnership with the management of that
Okay.
national preserve. So
Gotcha. Okay.
it kind of seems that like it could be because it's a national preserve, but it also means that whoever's managing does not want to be a part of it. Also seems is how they made it come across, but I don't actually know.
Okay. But that's crazy. So like one of the smaller area I imagine like by area, the east panhandle, it's got to be one of the smaller regions and that had like some of the most bears killed.
Yeah, exactly. I'll go ahead and include a map of it when we go ahead and post everything that you guys can see where we are actually being hunted. But yeah, very small areas. Central Florida was in a very small area. It feel like for how many hunters that they had, it should have been a much bigger area, but based on the area that was actually available, it was all very small, which means if a mass majority of these hunters were out and just in these 2 days, that was a lot. There were so many people out there hunting. But I'll go ahead and share that when we post everything. So, besides standard hunting regulations, so basically bear season, this bear hunt was treated like a deer season. FWC's only additional regulations were that the bear must weigh at least 100 pounds and cubs cannot be present if harvesting a female bear. So, mind you, this hunt was in October, which is when they are basically trying to eat as much as possible. They're in their fall, they're in that hyper feeding frenzy. That's what they're doing right now. 41% of the bears harvested were male Florida black bears, and with an overall 59% of the bears harvested were females. With 21% of the 59%, those were females that were lactating. So basically, in theory, those cubs that were not necessarily with mom, but they weren't necessarily with mom, but they were still relying on mom based on the age, based on the time frame. They, in theory, on paper, researchers say that they could have survived. So, I quote from FWC could survive. So, this is why I kind of say on paper, in theory, they could survive. But also, if we go back and think about our cub mortality rate in general for our cubs, it's about 25 to 50%. So if mom had two, then only one survived, and then you had the bear hunt that hopefully that cub is going to survive afterwards, but in case they don't, then you've had no offspring at all from that cub.
Imagine so I don't know. I know it's a thing, especially like out west with like cougars and stuff that sometimes the moms are getting killed and hit on the road and a lot of the attacks that you have or like problems when you have an interaction between the animal and humans is because they're usually young and like their mother's not present because they got hit by a car or something. So I would imagine you're putting those bear cubs at higher risk of more human interaction if their mom's not there because they're going to be looking for easier things and because they're not going to get taught don't do that, essentially.
pretty much. So I personally just kind of feel like they had to like come out and say that, include that in the report to not really cover their own, like, like, I think there is like, okay, we fucked up. We should not have done that this time. I think we also killed way too many, I think there were way too many female bears that were killed in this because that's just I just feel like it's such a wide range of time and there's a lot of factors that are not like consistent. So, but that is what they came out and basically just saying that on paper they could make it. So the 2015 bear hunt was open for a month long and was only able to last 48 hours due to how many hunters were out in the area, the amount of permits sold, and the very limited amount of regulations put in place to prevent the overkill of female bears, trophy hunters, and overall participation.
Was there any pushback from the hunters? Like, I would think I'd be kind of peeved that I'm one of 3,000. I paid my $100 or $300, and if I'm not out here in the first 48 hours, now it's shut down. Like, was there any
I
pushback on
imagine
that?
there was. However, I did not look into it. I didn't pull it up.
Yeah, I mean,
I remember, I do know, I remember this was 2015. I remember this being like right before high school and stuff. I do remember there being lots of news outlets about people being outraged that we were doing it, feeling like it wasn't necessary. And there was just a lot of different opinions. So, like, obviously, you've got the hunters that are like, hunting is not a problem. It is what it is. Let's do a hunting season, whatever. But then you've also got the hunters that are trophy hunters. And then obviously, people have lots of appealing feelings and opinions about both sides of hunting on that. There's people that are vegan just because of how they feel about animals and how they're being treated during hunting, and that's inhumane and that it's wrong. And not saying that that's not, but that's how people were feeling about it. But I will say that the general public at the time was basically saying that it was basically still kind of tied, but basically, for the most part, they were okay with doing a bear hunt to control the population, which I find that kind of surprising. But I imagine if you have a really big hunting community that's like, all right, I'm cool with doing a hunt, let's do a hunt, then that probably does make up a decent amount. Also, the fact that most people just are uneducated and aren't aware about the Florida black bear population. And personally, up until this episode, there's a lot of things I didn't know about the Florida black bear population or just black bears in general. So,
well, I mean, generally, so like as someone who has been vegan before, as someone who has hunted and grew up in a hunting family, I definitely see both sides. And generally, I think I do. Like, generally, I want to trust FWC and be like, yeah, if there's X amount that need to be killed, like, I understand it's not good necessarily to let a population just run rampant. If there are really truly too many, like that's how you get disease and illness and stuff like that. Like it's a big deal that we are actually able to hunt deer, or else there'd be way too many deer and it really throws off the whole environment. Like hunting definitely does serve a purpose and I have a lot of respect for it. But yeah, it sounds like a lot of the issue is more coming down to like, can we trust the FWC on this? Or like, do we trust the FWC and what they're saying? Because are these populations, it sounds like what I'm picking up is like, is the population actually out of control, or is it just that there's more human bear interaction? Not that there's too many bears, just that more things need to be done to mitigate that. That sounds like where more of the effort should go, I
exactly,
think.
and I think you well said, like, we have very different, we all have, like, both of us specifically, we have a lot, we were vegan, we are in a family that hunts, we have been hunting before, like, we have, like, a different view, we have a different respect and understanding for it, so I appreciate that, and I am glad for that, but I think really what it boils down to is, like you're saying, is that do we trust FWC? Do we actually think that they have the best interest in our wildlife, or is it actually that they're trying to micromanage and manage wildlife that doesn't necessarily need to be, and that actually we are the issue by how much of habitat loss, how much that we're taking away, we're building, we're eliminating resources, things like that. I did like recently listen to a recording for the black bear bear hunt that's possibly going to happen in the future. And FWC did say that they would never say that they would do a bear hunt or an annual bear hunt based on the fact of how much human and bear conflict there was. Which that's great that they're saying that, but in so many ways the reasoning for doing a bear hunt also still points to the fact that essentially that's what we're trying to limit, is how much contact is being made between human and bear. And so they did make that point and they made that statement. I believe it was Mike Orlando that made that statement, and he is the Division of Bear Management. But it's also like, I don't know how believable that is.
Yeah.
As well as I truly think that if we were really truly worried about the reproduction rates and the population of Florida black bears, then I think we would purchase land with the permits that were sold, or have ourselves set up that we can conserve or preserve, land areas that keep them away from the general public and also keep them in the areas that they are needed. Because as well, they eat insects, they eat plants. We do need the Florida black bear.
Well, yeah, that was my next question. So I know we had talked about like it was supposed to be used, like the money from this was supposed to be used to mitigate human conflict. Do we have like results of that? Like, do we know where that money got spent? Like, did we get new trash cans? Are there plans to like purchase land or at least keep land or even just minimum keep land protected so that they have space for an habitat? Is there any like moves like that being made? Because I think, like I said, I'm still not opposed to the idea that a hunt is helpful or necessary, if the population is doing well. But
I don't think we're doing enough to give them the area that they need. We're not doing enough in that aspect for me to comfortably say that we should be doing a bear hunt, and we should also consider doing an annual bear hunt.
I just think, like most things, it's like multifaceted. Like, there's two elements of it. There's like, yeah, sure, maybe we can cull some of the population, sure. But if the population does not have a home, then we're just, exponentially increasing how quickly we now have to protect the bear again. And like, it's a lot easier to prevent a species from being eliminated than to like bring it back from the brink of not being there.
Exactly. I don't know where the money went per se. I don't know what updates we've made. I do believe the trash cans did actually get like I think Central Florida, Seminole, parts of Orange County, they did get updated and things like that. But I still don't think it was actually enough to really do anything, because essentially the issue is that we don't have enough area for the bears to be in, essentially. So overall, I think if we started working towards that and was actually trying to resolve that first, then I don't think a bear hunt would be the worst thing to do. But also, if we keep destroying the habitat, we're not gonna be able to do a bear hunt either, because there's not gonna be enough habitat and enough safe ways to hunt bears, because we're gonna lose so much habitat. That is everything for the 2015 bear hunt. This is actually going to be a second part. I'm not sure when we're going to go ahead and upload it, but we will go ahead and upload it as soon as possible. And if you follow us on social media, you'll get updates on when we post that second part, where I talk about the future of black bears for 2025. There is a lot going on right now for their future and what it looks like. And that's not just for 2025. That's going to be their future each year. And I have lots of information to go over and share, and I just need to go ahead and do that in a separate episode. So, this concludes this week's episode. I thank you guys so much for listening, and we really hope you enjoy. If there's something you have learned today, definitely go ahead and share that with us. We'd love to hear it. Also, if you learned something, you want to leave us a review, we will share the reviews as well, and we always appreciate it. So, anything you want to go ahead and add, Kaylee?
If you have a Florida black bear story, you can email us at you are Florida podcast at gmail.com. I'd be curious to hear it, or if you've got like an opinion. I'd just be intrigued. I don't live in a particularly bear heavy area, so like the idea of being able
and
to
I do
see.
now.
Yeah.
Not in my
I
area,
mean,
but I could be close to one. Yeah.
I'm stoked at the idea of seeing a black bear, and I think it's interesting hearing like some of your notes from these meetings because like there's so much divisiveness over it, but like at the end of the day, I think most of us, hunters included, want a healthy black bear population because that allows you to actually be able to hunt black bears on a regular basis instead of once maybe every 10 to 13 years, if that's something you care about. And I think most sportsmen, whether it's hunters, kayakers, hikers, like want the best for the environment and everything. We just have sometimes different ways of looking at it. And I think if we can come together on that, then that can be really, really powerful and really good. So there's potential
Great.
for a lot to be here than just like don't kill the bears. Also
Yeah.
the like delayed implantation thing is really interesting. their reproductive systems. Wild.
Right? I thought that was so cool.
All right, we'll see you next week for another episode, something history based. I'd give you a hint as to what it is, but I'll probably change my mind before it happens. So, cheers.
Bye.
Bye.